Okay, so essentially Samba is like NFS with NIS or NFS with LDAP. And essentially what it does is it allows you to share files just like in NFS, right, with the server. And Samba pretends like it is a Windows file sharing server. So it pretends like it is, but it's not actually one. And then Windows clients can connect to it, and they can use it just as if it was a Windows server for file sharing. But it also will share, beyond that, it will also share printers, and it also will act as a unified universal user system where you can have them log in as their user on the remote server. So essentially, they can type in their username and password, and then they log in, and it could be their entire files and all that stuff for their account could actually be on the Samba server on the Linux, and they're connecting to it for the whole home account, and they're getting all their files. They're connecting from a Windows client to a Linux Samba server, and the Samba client on Linux could also be used where you are a Linux machine and you're connecting to the Windows file server, and you're pretending to be a Windows client, and it would work with you that way. So Samba server is going to, be where it pretends to be a Windows server, and Samba clients where it pretends to be a Windows client, but it's not. It's actually Linux. Essentially, this is really cool because you could do a combination of these. Because you could do NFS with NIS and Samba, or NFS with LDAP with Samba. And essentially what you can have is a single server that serves Windows, Linux, and also Unix for all machines. Now that covers all your operating systems right there. So essentially you can have one file server that serves all computers and have it in a unified file system, basically make your own SANs, more or less. And this will allow you to have it be unified without all the costs. You don't have to do anything complicated for translating it from one file system into another or anything like that. It's all handled within inside of Linux servers here. So it's all going into your extension file system 4 file format. The added benefit to it on the Samba server is that you could also eliminate viruses before they get to your Windows clients. And you also get double speed on the internet connection and 50% faster on your saving for your hard drive access time. So you get a lot of benefits here. You use like ClamAV in order to eliminate Windows viruses on Linux. So, and then you also have to realize that you can't get a Windows virus to knock out your Linux server, if that makes sense. So, normally you have a problem where some user brings them some files from home. Their computer is infected with all kinds of viruses because they have no idea what they're doing with their computer, which is all too typical of people who are, using computers who aren't trained in them and whatnot. They don't even use virus checkers sometimes. So they get infected and they take it to work and they infect their computer at work. And next thing you know, it's hopping onto the server, right? It's Trojans going across the network and infecting all kinds of computers across the network. Well, if you have a Linux server, you can actually prevent that from happening because when it goes onto the Linux server, first off, it's not taking down your server at the workplace. And secondly, you could eliminate that virus before it really gets anywhere. It won't get spread across the network. That's one reason. The other thing is cost. It's way cheaper. Like you'd realize they only buy like one service contract or whatever for the Linux station there, and then they can sit there and install it on as many stations as they like after that, and they literally save millions of dollars, not just in software costs, but realize also your internet connection is twice as fast. So guess what? You need half as many internet connections to do the same stuff. And then the server saves 50% faster on the hard drive. This means also because you have less hardware, it also means you use less electricity, which also means you use less cooling, which means less electricity on that end of things. Exactly. So you start saving hardware and software. So it's significantly more expensive to use Windows than it is to use Linux because it is so streamlined. It does run so fast and so cheap. And so they can afford to pay a network admin a lot more money for doing Linux than they can for Windows because it saves them so much money. So that's where you go. They want you to know a lot more doing Linux administration, but they do pay more too. Usually about 50% more, sometimes double. Yeah. 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 You'll see a difference in pay between the two. Yeah, and yeah, this is the most popular. Linux and Unix uh, are the most popular operating systems on the internet, and they make, I think, 85% of the internet is Linux and Unix. So Windows is a very small part of the networking infrastructure on the internet. They're dead last, and rightfully so, because I mean, you're just gonna get hacked really bad, and it's just a real problem. So because of that, companies also security is a big deal, and that's another reason for it too. You gotta realize that that's a big deal. This whole security thing is really important. So that's your reasoning for using a Samba server. Now this is a LAN server setup here, what we're talking about. So you are looking at local area network, LAN. WAN would be a wide area network like the internet, for instance. And how you approach this stuff can make a difference. Now we're going to look at, real quick, let me type in gedit. I scripted this thing up to make life easier. Well, to me it's easier. And here we are. So this represents all the commands for setting up a whole shares and such. I'll show you the files underneath what we're doing with the different commands. This does several things. This lets you automate your process for creating these servers on the fly real quick if you need to set up for multiples or whatever. Of course, you could also do clustering, which works great. It's a better setup than doing individual servers, but you can cluster with Linux. Not getting into that, but with this setup, the other thing is that it just has it recorded here as a script, and then you can follow that script along and see how to go about this stuff. And I'm going to show you how it actually edits the files by doing some of this stuff. So this is cool because we're actually going to have it edit the files without us going in and hand editing the files, if you will. So the more sophisticated and crazy we get with the scripts, that's another thing too, though, because it helps train you up on scripting, which is important. There's a lot of jobs out there for people who can script in Linux, Unix. It pays about $25 an hour. It's a great entry-level position at $50,000 a year with benefits. So that's not a bad deal as you work your way into a full network administration job. That's not network administration. That's just scripting. Yeah. Yeah. And they get paid $50,000 a year to know like Linux shell and Python. They typically like to have you have Python also. That's the preferred one. It's more powerful, but then you mix that with the shell. So, yeah. Basically, I'm just having to execute the bash shell here at first, at the top, and then I'm telling it to yum install -y to say yes to it automatically and install Samba. So it installs the Samba. Then we come down here, and this is Fedora 17 compatible. I wouldn't count on this thing working on 15 for nothing, or I don't count on anything to work on 15. Fedora 17. Alright, this is for Fedora 17 to be clear. These commands aren't going to work on CentOS because they don't have systemctl or whatever. You wouldn't do that. Instead, you would have done for the other one. Instead, what you would do for the other Linux distributions that are RPM based, you're going to do, like, especially for CentOS, sbin, right? chk config space, smb space on, like this. smb slash, yeah. And you're going to say service space smb start. And that's what you would do for CentOS. And what you used to do on Red Hat is also what you do on Mandriva, so on and so forth, SUSE. Basically every distribution of Linux besides Red Hat, Fedora. Ubuntu, you would not do system control on Ubuntu. You would do just the service one right here, and only that one. Right, you just say service space smb space start. Yeah. Yeah. So this should be your CentOS, SUSE, Mandriva, etc. And then I would assume you could do the sbin there, but no guarantees. They do place things in different places on Ubuntu, but It just has to do with actually if you edit your path variable here, and manipulate that, you can actually get rid of having to type in the sbin, because if you put sbin into here along with bin slash user bin, etc., those different different ones into your path variable, then that would allow you to not have to type that. It's what they didn't bother to do on CentOS for some crazy reason, and I don't know why, but yeah, because that's really annoying actually. If I just echo out $path. There you go. So you see we get all these different directories in here. So if you were to put these into your path, if you were to set your path variable permanently or whatnot, then every time you go type in service or chkconfig or whatever on CentOS, it would know where it is without you having to type out /sbin / same thing, you wouldn't have to type in /sbin / ifconfig, etc. Does that make sense? So you got multiple paths. Right, separated by colon. Right, your colon is your delimiter. Yeah. It checks against all those. So it checks against all these paths. Yeah, you can. Well, in CentOS, they got nothing in there. That's why it doesn't come up. That's why we have to type in /sbin / chkconfig and /service, because they didn't set the path like every other distribution of Linux. So that's what the deal is. Of course, you could also set it up individually for your own self or whatever too. But anyways, that's basically what needs to be done. So I thought I'd just point that out, why that is. So there's also a way to set up sudo on Fedora Red Hat too. Matter of fact, you can even set up apt-get in place of using yum if you want, or you could use it with yum. But I'm not going to get into that. But so basically, we're starting up two services here. Besides just SMB, we're also doing NMB too. So we're enabling those and we're starting those. So you would actually have this also for NMB along with SMB. SMB stands for Samba. I'm not sure what NMB stands for, but you would need to start and turn on both. So you would literally come down here, and instead of this one, it'd be say NMB. On the positive side here, you're not having to make much effort to making changes to it, right? But the cool thing about this is once you script it up again, you don't have to even lift a finger practically to get it going. So yay. And I think it's NMB, and they haven't changed it on us, but never know. But something like that. Right, and then of course we're doing Fedora down here. But anyways, just to point that out. So here's our differences here. And then echo creating staff group here. Add group, group add staff. And this adds a staff group if it doesn't already exist in your setup, so that we have staff. Just because that's what they wanted to use for tutorials. So whatever. User add, -g here adds a group to your user when you're adding them. In this case, staff here, space student. And then I'm echoing the password, and I'm piping it into the passwd one to set a password for something, and I'm doing -- standard in, so it passes it into the password for student. So instead of typing in password at the prompt or whatnot, it sends the word password to the passwd, and it goes in place of you typing it in, because standard in would be like you taking an input stream from the keyboard when you're typing it in from a TTY1 or something like that, which is essentially your terminal. So essentially we're sending the password stream of characters to the terminal, piping it to the function of passwd for that tool for setting the password for student. So that's the in-depth explanation of what's going on there. And as saying it in a simple way is to say that it just passes password for the password when you're setting the password, so that you don't have to type it in. What was -g? Right here at the user add. Yeah. That lets you add a group. to the user. So I could have multiple groups here, you know. I'm adding the students should still have the group student, but it'd be a part of staff also. Right. No, I'm adding the user, and it has, when I create the user, it has a group of student, and then the group staff already exists, and I'm adding that group to student. So you can have multiple groups added to a single user, and that's essentially what I'm doing here. And I can list multiple groups here if I wanted to. I could. Okay. The user is student. Group add adds a group, which we created a new group called staff. For us to add a group to the user student, I need to have it already exist. So I'm not creating the group staff. I'm creating the user student. And when you create a user student, it's going to create a group that goes with that student called student. And I'm adding the group staff to the user student so that everything that staff has privileges to, the student can access that. Does that make sense? Okay. To put it another way, graphically, just to make life easier, let's go to another terminal. Type in user. Alright, to put this another way, this would be the same thing as me going in here like so, and then going to my properties, going to groups, and then checking additional groups that I want to add the user to. Does that make sense? That's essentially what we're doing when we're saying the -G option. We're adding additional groups to our user student. Yeah. Now, when we want to say add a group here, when we click the create one, that'd be the same thing as add group command. And we're adding a user, it'd be the same thing as clicking here and say add user. The only thing is we can't, with this setup, automatically add additional groups that we want to the user on the fly. So after we create the user, then we have to then go to properties here and go to groups. But command line, you can do all of the above simultaneously. You can add additional groups to it. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can. Correct. So it'd be the same thing as clicking these different checkboxes, if you will. I guess group Spidey, maybe? I don't know. We just came up with stupid stuff earlier for the fun of it. Well, Spidey's a user, actually, so I wouldn't want to add it to Spidey, but I don't know. There's a lot of different things. Maybe www-data, for instance, right? Say that one, right? Well, I could do that easily. There we go. And now we have two groups being added. I can add a third one by doing another comma, etc. Comma is your delimiter, separator for those different groups. Make sense? No spaces when you're listing them. It's just commas. Okay. But anyways, and I'm just adding user Mark and adding him to staff, and user Max because they wanted to have Mark and Max, but they didn't go over how to add them. So I scripted up how to do it. Same thing. Again, I'm just passing password to them. I'm echoing out to the screen to let me know that I'm creating the user student, user Mark, and the user Max. I'm also letting me know that the password for the student is password. Password for Mark is password, and then password for Max is password. Of course, I could change it to something else if I didn't want it to be password. I'd simply change this right here to whatever password I want it to be. Make sense? Okay, so this creates these users on the Linux system. Alright, so I need to make a directory because it wants me to use /tmp/shared from the tutorial. So I'm going to make that directory. So I just did mkdir/tmp/shared, and it creates that directory. Yay. Then from there, what I did after this was remember file redirection from a graphical command line on the shell. So what does echo do? Does anybody remember? Right, so let me show you something here. This is something I want to point out. And it's really pretty ingenious. Doing this little trick. I mean, there are more sophisticated ways. This is simpler, okay? I'm trying to keep it simpler. There are more sophisticated ways of doing this stuff, but anyways. So say I run this command, what does it do? It says student equals student. Now I can redirect that as an appended entry to a file. Essentially, this adds this entry into a file at the bottom of the file. Yeah, don't do a single one because it'll wipe out the file. Replace it with just this one line, and that'd be pretty bad. There goes your whole configuration file. Yeah, don't do that. Not a good idea. But so you do need to know what you're doing. But the double greater than sign here, that actually redirects it to the end of the file. And what file are we going to? We're going to /etc/samba/smb users. So this matters because we are going to want, let me make that a little bigger here. So let me go here, su space -- become password, awesomeness. Let me go into /etc. Alright, it's hitting the slashes and it's not taking /etc/samba. Alright, let me see a whole list of files here, only 3 of them, not much, right? But I can cat smb users, right? And this file isn't very big. So when it first starts out here, it doesn't have these, but look what happened when I did actually append it. See how I added that entry to the bottom? Because originally, the only thing that this file had was this right here. So essentially, I'm permanently adding these users as Samba users from the system. Now, I could get really crazy with this. I could sit there and take, as a for instance, what if I were to cat past WD file? I'm sorry. I'm not thinking. If I were to cat that, oh, looky there, there's my whole listing of all my users on my Linux system. What I could do is check to see if I could write an if condition statement and see that if their user ID was above 500, to then include them and not anything below. Remember the whole if condition statements we were doing with the whole Apache server? We could do something like that. And then we could say, okay, and we could extract this user right here. And we could extract these different values with cut command. You know, we could use cut command. Was it cut dash D here? I'm trying to remember. Is it dash D or is it dash F1? Something like that. And then // I might need to put in the dash D and put the, yeah, so I got nothing but the names. And I mean, you know, you could do this different ways. You could use something like awk and then process it like a database entry, a set of records and stuff for the file. What you could do is then convert the colons to be tabs. So it's tabbed and then it could be processed by awk because you can't process it awk unless it's by tabs or whatnot. So you could do that way and handle it and then manipulate that data and automatically add those users to the file when it's run for that tool. Essentially by scripting it to get a little more sophisticated, but that would work from command line if you just want to, anytime you run the command. You could even set up on a Chrome tab job, Chrome job, so that it runs it every hour or something like that. So if any new users are added to the system every hour, it automatically just adds them to the Samba setup on the fly and just double checks the users against the file or whatnot. You'd have to do a little scripting to do that, but you could totally do that with shell scripting from what you've already learned how to do. You'd have to think about it a bit if you wanted to do that. Now, you're not required to do that or anything. I'm just showing you what is possible if you were to use some more commands and what you could do with this and start to realize, hey, you can actually take these files, you can extract values, you know, In the case of getting the user IDs, I mean, you could pass this into two separate files if you wanted to and process them separately. But F3 would be the third column there, for instance. If I want to process them together, I could do that too. I could say F1, comma 3. See?
And so what you're saying is in your script you can tell it anything over 500.
Right.
Type that into
Yeah.
your user.
Right. And add that user.
User file.
Right.
So that you automatically
correct. Yep. You could even process both files and double check, make sure that user's not already added. If the user is added, skip it. Get more sophisticated, but yes, you could do stuff like that. And once you do it, you can have an automated user added system for Samba, more or less, through scripting. I'm not going to get into any detail for how to go about it in depth, but that's basically it. If you do a loop, you're looping through each entry in the file as you read it in for the thing, and then test it against whether or not it exists as each loop iteration. So it's a nested loop inside of a loop, and you're testing if this entry is inside of this entry for every single entry in the file that you generated for the output versus that of so on and so forth. So that would let you test the two against each other, and thus generate just users that are needed and nothing more. But anyways, not trying to get too nerdy with it, but trying to give you ideas of how to do some things. A very simple approach is just to echo it in there, which is what I did. So I'm keeping it simple. Yeah. Oh, because the color, right? So there we go. So by doing that, we can redirect that line right here on the student equals student into the file SMB users. Right, and it's the same thing with the rest of the users here. Is that making sense? Okay. So just keeping it simple, we can do stuff with just the echo here and redirect it. Now, again, I could go in there and hand edit that and put it in, but if I automate the scripting, then guess what I don't have to do? Go in and hand input it in. After I write one of these functions and then I do it right, I don't have to ever do it again type thing. Now, of course, this isn't foolproof right here because it's just a very simple implementation. But if we were to do what I was suggesting earlier with the cut statements and doing the comparison and whatnot and adding the user by doing this echo to add it to the file, then it is foolproof. And then you don't have to think about anything thereafter. And you can just run it dumbly and it'll just work every time perfectly. It would add them again. Right, yeah, I mean, exactly. And then, and the thing about it is if I ran this script again, it would add student, Max, and Mark again to the user list. So then you'd have that name added multiple times, which you don't want. So, again, this is not foolproof. But it does give you an idea of how to insert information. This is good for if you're setting up a new server and nothing's been set up on it, basically.
So, like in our case where we already have student on our, let's say we're running this in CentOS, we already have the user students created.
Mm-hmm.
And we run this script, it's going to recreate student again.
It will for Samba. This is Samba user. Samba user is separate from the Unix users or Linux users on our system. That's why I was saying, like, if we grab it from the actual passwd file for our users, then we can have it sync the two up. But you would need to grab that, from there, cut it out, literally cut it with the cut command, extract those users. Only grab the ones that are above 500, right? Because otherwise they're like system processes, users on the system, and then if they didn't exist already in the SMB users file, then, by checking every line of the SMB users file, then you could add that user by doing this echo thing here, redirecting it so it goes added to the end of the file. Ta-da, there we are. So essentially that's what's going on there. since we've been going so much command line with the new curriculum here, I'm just showing you, just going with it, man. So here's how to script this stuff. Here's how to make it pull off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing, just like I was doing, where I was setting the password up here by doing the whole wonderful standard in here, where I was echoing the password over here to the passwd program to pass it in. I'm doing the same thing with Samba password, which is SMB passwd, but you have to, instead of typing in standard in, basically stdn, in, we use -s for SMB passwd because they don't have standard in. stdin means standard in, or standard input, as it's called typically in programming. And that's what's going on there. So we're doing the same thing there, and the -a is to add this user's password to it. So we're relisting the user for it. And in this way, we don't have to type in password over and over again for each user. It automatically passes password to the SMB passwd and logs them in for those users. Okay. Now, and sets those up. Here, I'm actually adding additional entries to the Samba configuration file. So let me show you how this one works. And this is the main configuration file for Samba. And yeah, we'll look at that in just a second here. And then here's your testing stuff, where you actually log in the user and test it. This one more or less sets the password for it. It sets the password for Samba for a user. Alright, so with that said, let's go ahead and look at the file that makes up the Samba configuration file, which basically is Samba, more or less. Okay, so I could cat this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to vim it because I want to have control over this file and show you where you can edit and whatnot. Okay, so this file's got a decent amount of stuff in here, and you can uncomment stuff to add it in, etc., etc., etc. And so there we go. So this is the main Samba configuration file. For detailed information about the options listed here, refer to the smb.conf5 manual page. Samba has a huge number of configurable options, most of which are not shown in this example. Yes, it does. The official Samba 3.2.x how-to and reference guide contains step-by-step guides for installing, configuring, and using Samba, which you can get at this location. So feel free to download it and get additional information. There's also books out there. You can get an entire book. I got a book about 500 pages long on Samba or whatnot for how to do it in depth, and it's very useful. And then they also have a lot of testing tools to help you troubleshoot and find problems that are also pretty nice and useful. I'd like to point that out too. So that's great. Here's the doc here too, generated daily. It's not going to be like readable like you probably want, but hey, it helps. So comments, as it's saying, are starting with a semicolon or a hash. So either one works. Turn the Samba domain controller boolean on to allow Samba to use the user add and group add family of binaries. Run the following command as the root user. Turn this boolean on. Set bool controller on. So literally, if you wanted to turn this option on, and I believe this will sync it between your Linux users and your group users, and this here. Turn the Samba enable home directories boolean on if you want to share home directories via Samba. Run the following command as the root user to turn this boolean on. And you could do that right there if you like. So put it another way, you can simply come in here, and if we so desire, we could actually just set this up to where we copy and paste it to run. So this is cool. This works with our scripting if we like. So if I want to, I can come in here like so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. So, and then, bam, now I got this. I mean, all I'm doing is hitting Control V here to paste it in here, and in the terminal I'm hitting Control Shift C to copy it. Remember, Control C kills the program, so I don't want to hit Control C like you normally would. It will mess it up. If you create a new directory, such as a top-level directory, label it with the Samba share _t, so that SE Linux allows Samba to read and write to it. Do not label system directories such as etc and /home with the Samba share t, as such directories should already have an SE Linux label. Run the ls-ldz path to the directory command to view the current SE Linux label for a given directory. So this lets you test what the SE Linux is for a particular directory to see if it has a proper label to make it work with SE Linux for security. There's all kinds of information in these configuration files. Feel free to read through them, man. I mean, they really got a lot of interesting stuff in them. Set Linux, SE Linux labels only on files and directories you have created. Use the chcon command to temporarily change a label. And here's an example of how to use that. Of course, you could always put this into your script if you need to and script it, etc. So you get additional power and capabilities with this stuff. Changes made via chcon are lost when the file system is relabeled, or commands such as restorecon are run. So it's temporary. Use the Samba export all _ro read only or Samba export all _read write boolean to share the system directories. To share such directories and only allow read only permissions, set bool Samba export all _ro on. To share such directories and allow read write permissions, set se bool-p Samba export all _rw space on. So this is nice. They're just like giving you a bunch of, here's how you go about doing different things. And they're just like literally straight up telling you, hey, you might want to do this. Here's how you do it, without you having to look it up or figure it out, more or less, which is great. Most servers don't do this for you. So this is quite a nice configuration file, and you definitely don't want to lose the comments in here or anything of the sort. To run scripts, here pre-execute root, pre-execute print commands, copy them to the /var/lib/samba/scripts directory so that SE Linux will allow SMBD to run them. So if you're wanting special scripts to run through Samba or whatnot, you need to put them in this special directory so that SE Linux won't stop you from running them with inside your Samba server. Note that if you move the scripts to /var/lib/samba scripts, they retain their existing SE Linux labels, which may be labels that SE Linux does not allow. So then you need to set those labels, SMBD, to run. Copy the scripts will result in the correct SE Linux labels. Run the restorecon-r-v/var/lib/samba/scripts command as the root user to apply the correct SE Linux labels to these files, and thus it fixes that problem. So again, they tell you everything, basically, how to do all that stuff. So that's really nice. Global settings. We first start defining the section by, and we put brackets every time we're defining a section inside of this file that we're doing something. In this case, it's global settings, so we put global inside of brackets. So for the start of that definition. And then here we have different related network options. For instance, workgroup equals the Windows NT domain name or workgroup name, for example, my group. Server string equals the equivalent of the Windows NT description field. And net BIOS name equals used to specify a server name that is not tied to the host name. So those are important, very important, matter of fact. We'll look at those in just a second here. Server string and workgroup are your two most important ones out of those. You almost always end up setting these. It defaults to a certain one. I'll show you here in a second. But you can actually change these. Okay, so interfaces here. Use to configure Samba to listen on multiple network interfaces. If you have multiple interfaces, you can use the interfaces equals to option. Configure which two of those interfaces Samba listens on. Never omit the local host, or LO. So that makes sense because that's loopback. Otherwise, you can't test against yourself, can you? If you omit that, that's not a good idea. So always LO. Host allow equals the host allowed to connect. These would be IP addresses or IP address ranges, etc. Where you allow only certain IP address range computers to be able to actually connect to the Samba server. So this way you could actually specify that, hey, this particular network group of computers are allowed to connect to the Samba server. And you could have multiple Samba servers. You can have different groups connect to different ones or whatever if you wanted to. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And this option can also be used on a per share basis. Yes, meaning that you wouldn't necessarily have to have multiple Samba servers. I mean, you could. Depends on how much traffic you had hitting your network. That's depending on whether or not you needed multiples. But if you didn't need multiples, what you can do is you can set up host allow for each particular share. So only certain groups of computers are allowed to access that shared directory for them. So meaning you could have different clusters of computers with each one being only allowed to access certain folders on the server that would contain files. Maybe the accounting group, we know their whole accounting group of computers or the certain IP range over here, right? And so we only allowed them to access the accounting folders, the accounting shares, if you will, right? Over here we have engineering, right? And engineering, we know they have this IP address range for their computers, right? And we want them to only be able to access these certain computers for the IP range. So, for that their share folder. So, and then engineering wouldn't be able to access accountings, accountings wouldn't be able to access engineerings, etc., etc. And you can set that control up as you deem necessary. So that's pretty cool. Host.deny, you can actually block certain computers if you like. Max protocol used to define the supported protocol. Default is NT1. You can set it to SMB2 if you want to experimental SMB2 support. Alright, so here's an example of the work group here. And right now it's set to my group. Now we could set it to something different. And our school here, we set it to what? Campus, right? That's what the schools is set to. So if I hit I here or whatever and go into edit mode, insert mode, I could actually say campus. Does that make sense? Okay, and that's going to change my work group. Another thing here is the server string. The server string here is saying what the Samba server version is, and it has %v. Don't change that. That %v is a special variable that always gets the version number from what the RPM that's installed on the system. So say you update the program by doing a yum space update or whatever, and it updates Samba to a new version. Guess what? You don't have to come back in here and edit this file and change it. The %v is automatically going to put the new number in there for you because it grabs it on the fly every time we run or check something. So yeah, everything's good. NetBIOS name. This would be the name of your server. So if I were to uncomment this, remember this little semicolon is a comment here, right? So if I were to uncomment this, right, I could come in here and change this from my server to something else. And I think we called ours, what, Bacon server? And that's so not spelled right. Alright, so Bacon server it is. Is this making sense? And then, this is cool though, on the Windows network, that's on the campus network, on the Windows network, Bacon server would show up. And the Windows clients could double click on it and enter in their password and username and log into it and have access into those folders and those printers. That's exactly what happens. I kid you not. I've done it here at the school. Of course, we can't do it on the virtual machine. But if we were actually on the network and we weren't running in a virtual machine, that is what happens. It's really cool. And then they can just literally just double click on it right on their computer, and it's just like if it's there on the Windows network. You just go into the shared, to your Windows network, inside your folder or whatnot, down there on the bottom left-hand side. And, you got shared computers, networks, blah, blah, blah. You click on there, bam, you go into campus. Inside of campus, go into Bacon server. You'd be able to go in, log in, and then you get access to the files and to the printers. Kid you not. That's it. So that's how it would work with Windows accessing it. It's pretty cool. You can even set up, well, I know how I used to do it. I don't know how you would do it now, but we're just going to run the command line checks on it and whatnot, because they used to have a graphical thing I would go to test it with, but it's not there now because they changed the interface. So I'm not real sure how you do it in the new interface. So we're just going to use the command line way to test it, and that works and lets us know that. It's kind of cool to see it graphically though, because you can actually see the folders as you open them up and see the files and see the printers. You can do that when you do SMB client, Samba client, or whatever. You connect to your Samba server here. You put in the proper information for the connection, but that whole graphical tool is not there anymore. It's in the older version. So I don't know what they've done with it. It may be in here somewhere, but I haven't found it yet, so I don't know. But we can use the command line ways of testing it, and that works. So that's what we're going to do. Here's the interfaces. Remember, LO is loopback. Remember that ETH0 be our first Ethernet card, and here's some IP address ranges here, just as an example. Does that make sense? So this is Ethernet devices and what IP addresses we're allowing on it. Then we have host.allow, and this is which IP addresses we're allowing. You notice that they closely match that of the interfaces up above, for obvious reasons. Max protocol is set to SMB2 if you like. Log files specify where log files are written to and how they are split. So yeah, you can actually have log files split at a special particular point in time. I'm not going to get into it. There's a command in Linux that will actually make you split files up based on however many lines are in a file. Essentially, that's what it's using underneath the hood for shell script. Max log file size specifies the maximum size that log files are allowed to reach. Log files are rotated when they reach the size specified with the max log size. And size is based on number of lines, I believe. Defaults to /var/log/samba/log dot %m. Unless you have a really good reason, don't change this. That's standard location for Samba log files. So, I mean, if there's some security reason you need to change it or whatever, fine, whatever, but otherwise don't change it. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It is based on kilobits on theirs. They're using a different method than I thought. Okay, it's not based on the line number. The other tool is. So this is based on kilobits here for breaking it up. Standalone server options. We got security mode. Samba runs in. This can be set to the user share depreciated or the server depreciated. Past DB here backend. The backend used to store the user information in. Now this could be used with different things. You could actually use LDAP with this if you want. Believe it or not, it could be hooked up into database systems. You can do it with a number of methods here for this. So it doesn't have to be just one particular way. So installations use either TDB SAM or LDAP SAM. So there you go. As far as LDAP goes, no additional configuration. This is required for the TDBA. So basically, this is the DB there is database, and the LDAP is your LDAP version. The SMB passive utility is available for backwards compatibility. So there we go. We're not going to mess with that. Security equals must be set to domains or ads past the DB backend. Backend used to store the user information in. New installations should use either TDB SAM or LDAP SAM. No additional configuration is required for TDB SAM. Below the SMB WD utility is available for backwards compatibility. Realm, only use the realm option when security adds option is set. The realm option specifies the Active Directory realm the host is a part of. So password server only equals only use this option when the security server option is set, or if you can use the DNS to locate a domain controller. You can actually use DNS for lookups too in this, by the way, which is nice. You can also go through NIS. I think you can also go through LDAP, etc. Some of these different ones for doing the lookup along with host files. Anyhow, so the argument list can include my PDC underscore name, my underscore BDC underscore name, and my next BDC name. Password server equals that whole fun stuff right there. Use password server equals star to automatically locate domain controllers. Sounds great. So here we have security equals domain, pass DB backend equals T DB SAM, and realm equals my realm, etc. Password server, NT server name, etc. So you can set that up if you need to. We're not going to touch that. Domain controller options, security equals must be set to the user domain controllers. That's all the same kind of stuff. Domain master specifies Samba to be the domain master browser, allowing Samba to collate browse lists between subnets. Do not use the domain master option if you already have a Windows NT domain controller performing this task. If you don't, you would need to have Samba perform that task. Domain logons equals allows Samba to provide a network logon service for Windows workstations. Logon script specifies the script to run at login time on the client. These scripts must be provided in a shared name net logon. Logon path equals specifies the with a UNC path where the user profiles are stored. So here we go. And there's given another example of a setup where you can have domain master equals yes, domain logons equals yes, etc., etc. And then they have some other breakdowns for how to do the logon script stuff and whatnot, and logon path. Already pretty much filled out for you, so that way you can just do minor editing on the stuff, and it gives you a nice, great example to work off of. So you're not working blind here, more or less, is what I'm saying. So that's pretty nice, and that's pretty cool. Also, like to point out that these different symbols here mean different things. Here, I believe %U is user, if I remember right. And I can't remember what %M is. I can't remember. It's been too long. Alright. Alright. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up to be sure. Various scripts can be used on a domain controller or a standalone machine to add or delete corresponding Unix accounts. That's pretty cool. Add user script. And this literally will add the users in groups. So if you uncomment this, this will automatically add your users, which is awesome. Add group script. And this will automatically add groups from the Unix. So you don't have to write, like I was talking about, how to do that comparison stuff, or whatever. You wouldn't have to do it. They have it built in here into your configuration. Yes. Yes. Just the same way I was talking about doing. Yeah. You do the same thing. Add machine script /usr /sbin /user add, and then -n -c workstation, etc., etc., etc. So this adds a particular machine. Delete user script. I like enabling these. I'm a big fan of these. I love these because once you set this up, it's awesome. I've done this a bunch of times. Usually use graphical interface to set this up instead of doing it by command line here for editing the file. But essentially when you set this up, whenever you add a new user, it automatically gets added to Samba. And then when you delete a new user, it automatically deletes that user from the system. And what's really cool about this is if you set this up and uncomment these right here, what will allow you to do is have a unified user base for Unix, Linux, and Windows. And they can access their user accounts from any of those systems. So they can literally go, say they're using one program on Linux, you can literally go on and use it and tie into their account and get all their data and everything for one program on Linux, and then they can switch over to another computer later on the network and access their same files again, but on Windows now with the same user account and everything. Does that make sense? So if you sync this up, basically if you uncomment this, it'll sync them up. And then you don't have to worry about that. And then every time you create a new user, it automatically adds it to Samba user. Every time you delete a new user from Unix, Linux, here, it automatically deletes them. It's no hassle type setup. So it's really, really quite cool. I love it. I think it's great. They have this as options inside of Webmin where you can go in and set this up in the graphical configuration. So, I mean, it's really cool, but this is how to do it from the command line side of things. And it's just a really nice feature. So I'm a big fan of it. On the downside of this, say you wanted to keep a group of users separately on your Samba versus that of your Linux user setup here, you're going to want to not delete the user or whatnot, so that way that it won't automatically remove users from the Samba that aren't part of the Linux system. So you'll want to be careful about that. But otherwise, this thing is awesome. You know, if you don't need to have a special setup like that, then you can have them totally unified. Man, go with it. Uncomment this stuff. It's great. So you don't have to worry about it. I mean, you still have the ad in there. The ad's not going to, prevent you from having that. So that way, every time you add a user, automatically adds them to your Samba. So you can do that if you like, and still have users for the Samba that are only for Windows and not part of the Unix system. But I'm just warning you, if you put the delete stuff in there, you can actually have it wipe out your users that are for your Windows Samba that aren't a part of your Linux user list. It'll wipe them out. So, browser control options. Local master. When set to no, Samba does not become the master browser on your network. When set to yes, normal election rules apply. OS level determines the precedence of the server has in the master browser. Elections, the default value should be readable. Preferred master. When set to yes, Samba enforces a local browser election at startup and gives itself a slightly higher chance of winning the election. Yay! Even servers have elections. Alright, so local master equals no. OS level equals 33, and preferred master equals yes. Thankfully, there's no voting, cheating, or anything like that on the servers here. Alright, so we have name resolution. Check it out. We can have wins here. For all those of you who remember wins from back when, it's like server 2000. And then they also have CIFS, which is like the newer stuff, your Windows XP and newer, and later here. So probably almost always you're going to be using CIFS for your Samba setup and not Wins. Wins is dated; it's dead pretty much at this point. Right, exactly. So note Samba can be either a Win server or a Wins client, but not both. Don't really care because I don't care about Win support anymore. Win support, when set to yes, the NMBD component of Samba enabled its Win server. It was really cool when it first came out, because that's when because this thing's been around since like I think Windows 98, Windows 2000, something like that, man. It's been around for a while. It's been Windows 98 because NT. Yeah, they had Samba support. Yeah, the server's been around for a while, and then they went to CIFS to deal with Windows XP, etc. And it works. Works good. And this is basically our solution to network with Windows, because before that, Windows wouldn't network with Linux. They refused to type thing, so we had to develop our own server to network with Windows because they didn't want to work with us at all. So, and Linux wants to work with everybody. So basically, it's their deal. So, and they do. So that's kind of the thing here. So the server's been around for a long time. That's the cool thing about this, guys. Once you learn these servers, I know it's like a lot of stuff to learn, but once you learn it, doesn't change a whole lot, and there's not like, you know what I mean? You're not like, oh my gosh type thing. You're not gonna get hit with suddenly a crazy setup, and you just do the same stuff over and over again. It's not like you don't have the problems, and you don't have. It's not bad at all. Anyways, Wins proxy, yay proxies. non-Windows capable client, etc. When server default to no, DNS proxy. When set to yes, Samba attempts to resolve net BIOS names via DNS. So you can do a DNS lookup if you have a DNS server on your network. If that makes sense. For finding computers on your network. We'll get into DNS probably next week, would be my guess. It's probably the next server I'm going to do. Yeah, and I'll also show you how to set it up on Amazon Cloud for the. Oh no, I can't because my computer has to be on the network. Actually, one of the instructors just told me that he has a hotspot here, so I'll talk to him about getting that hotspot set up for next week. So that way I can show off how to basically go on the Amazon Cloud and set up a DNS server. Because their DNS is so cheap. Oh my gosh. It's 50 cents for the first 10 billion hits. After that, it's another 50 cents for the next 10 billion. And you get like 4 worldwide servers. You're not going to be able to get overrun on being, denial of service attacks or, anything like that. So I use it. It's awesome. A lot of companies use it. You cannot buy a computer cheap enough to do a DNS server any other way. You'd be crazy to. I mean, they have so many people on it. They can just make it cheap, dude. That's how they're doing it. He's got so many people on it. That's what the deal is. And so it's a super powerful server, so I don't have to worry about it. It's a massive super mega cluster of computers. It's a multi-master super mega cluster, yeah. It's the Death Star of networks, alright? Don't ask me to say it several times fast. Alright. But it's really powerful. And it's super cheap. I mean, I wouldn't imagine you wanting to use your own DNS server in your company unless you just need the security there of having it inside of your company. You know what I mean? Unless that's your reasoning to spend the money. Otherwise, if you don't have that as a concern, it's not like super high security for the company or whatever, dude, use their DNS servers. You know what I mean? At 50 cents, you can't touch it. You cannot touch it. And you'll probably not get 10 billion hits. If you do, you got other problems. It's not going to be a DNS server. It's going to be all how they can handle that much traffic, coming to your site or whatever. So, or through your network. So you get bigger problems than a DNS server. But yeah, you can handle just ridiculous amounts of hits on it. I mean, all their stuff is just crazy cheap. Like what one of our guys said, so it's free. I was like, no, it's 50 cents. He said, essentially, it's free. Well, 50 cents covers their cost. It's awesome. So these options, so we're getting to the printing options where we can set up the printers. Then we have a couple of different ways we can do this really realistically. We can set it up to where all the users can access all the printers. All right, so we can do it that way, right? Or the other way we can do it is where only certain users are allowed to access certain printers. And in a real world situation, that's probably what you'll have to do. Probably whoever is the president of the company, unless it's a very small company, is probably going to have their own printer. And probably you don't want the rest of the company staff to be able to print on his printer. Because next thing you'll know, you'll get stuff printed on the boss's printer that shouldn't be printed on there, and then he'll just be working, and then he'll want to know why there was butt cheeks printed on his printer or something of this nature, So you want to avoid any of that kind of stuff from happening. So and then you'll have to go and hunt down the person who did it so he can fire him. So Cups options here allow you to pass options to the Cups library setting. And remember, Cups is our printer system on Linux, so we use Cups for this. Option to raw, for example, allows the use of drivers on your Windows clients. Print cap name equals used to specify an alternative print cap file. And also load printers when set you yes. What? The list of printers is automatically loaded rather than setting them up individually. Okay, so when you say load printers, it's going to display all the printers. And raw means that they can use any printer driver to print to it. we're going to basically go through PostScript for printing, more or less. Print cap name, for instance, /etc/print cap. Obtain a list of printers automatically on the Unix systems. Print cap name equals LP stat, which would be the printer status, and printing with cups. Depending on however you have cups set up, depends on how it's going to do printing. Typically, you're going to use IPP because it's going to be, if you're smart, you're going to get network printers and not have dedicated computers to do as printer hosting on it, etc., etc. Of course, if you have network printers and the Windows users can be hooked up to those, you don't even need to run it through Samba. And that frees you from even having to worry about the printers altogether. Does that make sense? But if you wanted to, you could go through cups through IPP and act as a gateway for it or whatnot. So that's something else you could do. Okay, file system options. Some more of them here. And we're going to get to where we're actually breaking down our different file shares here. After this little paragraph right here, I'm going to go over how to actually break down file shares and how we're going to add our own, essentially. And this is important. So the options in this section can be uncommented if the file system supports extended attributes, and those attributes are enabled usually via the user xatra mount option. These options allow the administrator to specify that DOS attributes are stored in extended attributes and also make sure that Samba does not change the permission bits. These options can be used on a per share basis, setting them globally, and the global section makes them the default for all our shares. So if we go over here to, and then here you can say map archive. Do you want to archive it? Do you want it to be hidden? Do you want it to be read only? Map system equals no. Store DOS attributes, yes, etc. And that can matter. Like if you want to have some of the stuff work like it does in Windows for, do you want to avoid case sensitive casing? Because Windows you can do uppercase or lowercase for stuff like that. So you might want to allow for that kind of stuff type thing. So on and so forth, and all that. There's additional options that aren't even listed on here. There's more stuff than what I'm going over. This is just a vanilla basic basis listing. When we did Webmin, we went through all the options, literally, and there was a lot of them. But just letting you know, you can even do that too. So you can actually define whether or not it's case sensitive on stuff and whatnot. Anyways, so this is cool. You have this one called homes, and homes would be your home directories for each user. Does that make sense? And so this is a standard default one, and of course it's in brackets because what did I say about brackets earlier? That defines a section. Okay, cool. So these are shares though. And then comment equals, and the comment's whatever you want to say for it as a description to someone who's trying to access it, so that way they understand what it is that they're looking at, more or less. So it's like a comment to leave the end user accessing the system. In this case, we're saying home directories, and that's pretty straightforward. Browsable? No. Meaning when you're logged in, you can only see your own, and you can't see anyone else's. So we're not allowing them to go, hey, let's see what Sally's looks like. You know what I mean? Of course, they still have to have permission to access Sally's. So even if they can browse it and see that Sally's there, they can't access Sally. They can double click it, but it won't let them in, more or less. Correct. They won't even be able to see that Sally or any other ones even exist other than their own. The only one they'll see is just themselves, and they won't see all the other users on the system at all, as far as their folders even being there, which is the way you want it for a home directory. Writable, yes. Otherwise, they can only read their files and they can't save anything. It's not going to be a good policy, in my opinion. Typically, people do want to save their files in their home directory. Valid users, %s will get it. Okay? Special option, just use that. And valid users, and it's going to be my domain / %s, whatever that is for the domain. I think we ended up going campus, yeah, so I think we'd have to change that. But these are commented out. I can uncomment these and add these if I need to, etc., etc., etc. But, so on and so forth. Printers. All printers. Okay? So that's what our comment is. And this is going to be all printers. So this would be listing all of them. Path is /var/spool/samba. All right, because that's where your printers would be. Because your printers are inside of /var/spool, and Samba would be a special Samba setup for the printers. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Browsable, yes. Obviously, if we want to be able to share all the printers with everybody, we need them to be able to see all the printers. So of course we have to say yes. Guest, okay? No, you have to be a user on the system to access it. Not just anyone can access it. Writable equals yes. Otherwise, they can't print. Kind of important. And printable, yes, for obvious reasons. Uncomment the following to create a net login directory for domain login. So if you need to do that net login stuff earlier, here's where you can set it up right here and just uncomment these, and it gives you a nice standard setup for it. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, now note there's a whole lot more options than what are listed here. You could probably list a couple hundred for each one of these shares if you wanted to. We're not going to touch it, so we're just staying with the basics right now. There's a lot more stuff here, though, honestly. Again, this is a network logon service. Has this directory for it. Is it writable? No. Is it shared modes? No. Guest, okay, equals yes to it, whatever. Roving profile share, if you want to set that up. Default here, though, is to set up and use our home directory above. So, I'm not a big fan of that stuff where you just allow anyone on your system. I'm not a big fan of that. Publicly accessible directory that is read-only except for users in the staff group, which have write permissions. So here it says public stuff. Public, yes. Writable, yes. Printable, no. Plus equals plus staff. So write list plus equals plus staff. So it means they have to be part of group staff. Right.
So if that was like documents, say you had a section, you wanted your web page to reference a section of public documents for your company.
No, this would be like other computers hooking up on your network, and a certain group of people are allowed to edit these documents, and the other people are only allowed to view them. Does that make sense? Like maybe you have like your whole sales division or whatnot, and then you have your engineers, right? So they have the engineers edit the documents and stuff like that, but the salespeople are only allowed to show them to customers. Makes sense? So on and so forth when they're going off and showing them off to people. So that way you don't have salespeople accidentally, changing the plans to something important. Yeah, right. So here's the two shares we're going to create. We're going to create temp. We're going to tell it that's comment public share of /tmp, and the path is going to be /tmp or temporary files here. And the other one is west. Not sure why, but apparently we're part of the West Wing staff. I guess we're part of that TV show now. So comment equals files for the West Wing staff. Path here equals /tmp/shared. That's why I had to do the mkdir/tmp/shared, because this folder does not exist. Browsable equals no. Write list equals plus staff. Make sense? Right.
Now, if you're a member of the staff, do you have write privileges? Does that mean you can browse it as well, or you're just saying yours?
You would need to be. Says no.
So if I'm a member of the staff group,
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I get what you're saying. We didn't say public is yes on this. We didn't say public is equal to yes on this one. So they would have to be a user on the system to access it. And they need to be a member of staff in order to make write changes to it. But it couldn't just be like any guest user on the system to access the file. So they're not really going to be public, so to speak. They're only for users of the system. Because we had to say public equals yes up above here, if I remember right. So, but in our case, since we're going to be generating these, I'm going to delete all this because our file is going to create this. So essentially, that is what our script we were writing a second ago over here. Check it out. Look what it did. It created an empty space because I wanted a space in there, so I put double quotes here, and I redirected it to the smb.com file, right? Then I did in quotes here in brackets temp, and I redirected that to the smb.com file. Now notice I'm doing double greater than signs, so that means it's going to append it to the end of the file, right? Otherwise I'm going to wipe out that whole configuration file. That'd be stupid. Don't do that. So double greater than signs. It's really good to be very accurate on this stuff. If you're not accurate, it will not work. Echo here, comma equals public share of /tmp, close quotes. Oh, I'm sorry. So there we are. Comment equals public share of /tmp, close quotes, greater than /etc/samba /smb.conf, etc. And then I'm saying path is equal to tmp. Again, I'm redirecting that to the smb.conf file, and then I'm just redirecting a blank line so I can space it between the two. So I'm keeping things nice and neat. And then I'm saying echo here west, and I'm appending that one for that new section. Comment files of the West Wing staff, files for the West Wing staff, sorry. And again, I'm redirecting that to smb.conf. Path equals /tmp/shared, and that's again getting redirected to the samba /smb.conf one, right? Echo browsable equals no, again to the smb.conf is where it's redirected to it for the appending it. And then right list equals plus staff, again it's being appended to the smb.conf, and then I'm appending a blank line at the end. Does that make sense?
So when you run that, it's going to put it back in what you just deleted.
Correct. Is literally going to put that back in. Yeah, sure is.
Even if you had commented that instead of deleting that stuff from the comp file, if you had
right.
If you commented it, you would have the comments, and then you would add that again.
Yes. Correct. Because it's going to append it on the fly here. I'm going to run this in just a second, and you'll see what happens, which is cool. And then here on this one, I probably also want to do this right here, where I'd want to change the group here. So I'd probably want to do chgrp, right, /tmp/shared, etc. And I'd probably want to set the group to staff, right, for that folder, so that matches. I'm just saying. Right. Yeah. Change owner. Could make it student. /shared. That will work. Make sense?
Change the owner to student. What happens to Max and Mark?
They still get the permissions of group. I mean, if you want, we can do this whole deal right here. chmod space 770, right, /tmp/shared, right. All right. One other thing I need to make sure is that I deleted those users from the SMB users. Otherwise, we have a problem, right? Because those users will get added twice, which I don't want. So of course I didn't, and I need to. So I'm just hit DD to delete each line. Hit DD twice, and hit escape. Shift ZZ to save. Blah blah blah. All right. Now, let me make sure I've saved the script here. Is this making sense though? Cool. And then I can just run this whole thing and just have it automated, basically, which is great because that's what we want. /home/student/scripts. So where I put mine, I just like it. I did a chmod on here +x space and then the name of the shell script to make it executable. So I can do that, or I can just say sh space and then the name of the shell script. In my case, I'm just going to do / because I made it executable already, so I can get away with that. Samba. I could type this whole thing out, but I'm lazy, so I don't see myself doing that. There we go. See, too lazy to type. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. And there it goes. It goes through and does everything. So it goes to create the user, finds the student already exists, goes through the authentication, sets the password for student, goes through, creates the user Mark, only finds out that Mark already exists, does it for Max, finds out Max already exists, sets password for both of them, comes through here and tells me that the TMP shared file exists, etc. Yeah, I'm not sure what this is. Not passwords. Where is it getting stuck at? Yeah, it is. It's weird. It ran last night. Of course, I made a few changes to it today. Let's see here. So it went through here. Maybe. It's very possible. Because I didn't have any changes on it earlier. Like I said, what I had last night worked fine. That's what I get for changing anything, right? Especially when I'm presenting it. They always tell you not to do that. Of course, what do? Do exactly that. Let's see here. Logging into users. Alright, let's see if my files have been edited. That's a good test on this. So let me just do real quick cat, not cart, but cat slash etc slash daggone it slash etc slash typing slash. This is not doing slash. Alright, slash and then smb.conf. Actually, I'm lazy. Let's tail that instead. Because this is going to be the bottom set of lines anyways, right? So that was the bottom of it, and what we get for the end of it is not what I want. So it never did write to this file. Check it out. If I cat it real quick, I'll show you what I mean. If I cat this file real fast, nothing. See? So it didn't make it that far. So it didn't edit the file. Let's check out SMB users. Let's see if it did anything with it. It helps if you spell it right. And it did add that. So it went through. Alright, so it edited one of them and it didn't edit the other. Okay, interesting. It made it through this. Yeah, it did, didn't it? See, and the fun part is this worked last night, so.
You know what? Did you have student Mark and Max in the SMB password file?
Yeah, I added them right here. See?
But did you already have them in there from last night?
Yeah, last night.
Now I tried to add them again to the password file.
I deleted them ahead of time. Yeah. It didn't make a mistake like that. Thankfully. Let me check. Maybe it was a set bool thing is what's throwing it off. It's a possibility. So, because I didn't have that in there last night, so I think that might be where we're running into some headaches. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and vim this and delete those entries again. Don't have to worry about doing the other one because I never made it that far. Alright, escape, shift Z. Let's run our script again. Yeah, about the same, man. So check it out. And we have different things here. We have my group. Localhost is the master. Work group is my group because we never changed it to something else. Could change it to something else if we wanted to. So on and so forth. And we see this for each user. pretty cool. And then we get a whole list of our shares and our global options here. Yeah. So that's nice. Last night I didn't have anonymous logon. I had individual logons, and that might be because I changed the work group to campus here or whatnot, and that might be the problem, along with it being set to bacon server. So, because that was not, yeah, I think that's what the deal is. Because I changed that part, so it made it anonymous instead of particular users logging in. So I did have it with particular users logging in last night. Again, I made changes that I probably shouldn't have done. I'm demonstrating this stuff. And it just doesn't take much to derail something. So, let's see here. If I go all the way up to the top, because that's where it was. Yeah. It was my group, wasn't it, for the work group? Was it all caps? And then what was the, well, you know what? We had this commented out, so I really and then I'd have to go in and edit those files real quick. So again, page down real fast. Hey, that's the bottom. All right. Is this stuff making sense though? Okay, and then let me just vim that user file here real quick. Delete those users. So this is some of the power of scripting. And then, you know, I can work out whatever issues I have to make it work out or whatnot, and then I can just keep using the script over and over again. And I don't have to worry about. And I'm doing a test parameters here at the end to make sure, hey, it's coming out clean and all good and everything. If it doesn't, it's going to give me error messages when I run the test param. These user logins is another test here. So essentially, I'm running my test as part of my script to make sure everything comes out clean and good when I do this. So that's useful. Alright, I don't know why it's doing anonymous login. Doesn't love me today, I guess. It was actually logging in as individual users last night. Whatever. I don't know. I've done something different. Anyways. And here it dumps the definitions again, like so. There's one other thing you can do is use SWAT. That's from your book there. And I set up how to do the SWAT here. Samba SWAT. So here's another script for how to do the SWAT. And what I did is I backed up the Samba configuration file before I did this, because this is fundamentally different than your Samba. I don't like SWAT. My reason why I don't like SWAT is because it dumbs it down to where you don't have some of the options you normally do, and you lose some control over your server. That's my beef with SWAT. SWAT was made in order to make things easier to set up and easier to do, easier to configure for SMB, but I think in its approach of doing so, it made it to where you lost control of some of your stuff. You don't have the real control I would like to have anyways from it. So I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not going to require you to do it, but this is how you do it. Yum space dash dash enable repo equals fedora space install space dash y. Here's samba dash swat, and that installs swat, and then we need to turn it on, which should be chk config space swat space on. system control restart space exinid dot service. Doesn't sound right. That's what it told me to do, but chances are what we want to be is enabled with the system. I don't know, they haven't gotten all the system CTL stuff in place, so maybe you still have to do chk config. Who knows? Not all of the system CTL. Was it on, I think NFS, the enable doesn't work on it when you run it enable. So ideally this is what you would do instead, but who knows if it works. Here we make the directory, we copy particular files here, back it up, and then that's set to echo out this and redirect it into Firefox. And what this does is it launches SWAT. It's on port 901 on localhost here, and it lets you basically graphically manipulate your Samba server through a web page called SWAT, assuming it works. So, you still got to come in here afterwards, command line, and come in here and restart both SMB and NMB. And then you can run a diff function, which is a programming tool, to find the difference between two files. And every place there's a difference between two files, it highlights it up and shows the text on it. And that's what the diff tool does. It's really useful, actually. It's great also to check to see if there's differences in between two different configuration files really quick. It's exactly what you're doing there. So not only is it useful for programming, it's also useful for networking too. It's great if you want to find out if you know what the configuration file is supposed to look like, and a hacker has gone in and manipulated it. You can run a diff tool between the two files and find out what the difference is between them, and then we can find everything that hacker has done to that file. Sort of, yeah. Yeah, so it's really useful. It's a really useful tool. And then cat here displays the contents of it, and then test param to run test parameter again. Essentially, that's what it is. And I think it's on, hold on a second, Samba is on chapter 23. And SWAT is on page 831, 832, 833, and that's essentially what they have on SWAT. 3 pages. That's it. There's also a graphical tool for setting up Samba from Red Hat, and they don't have much on it, but you need to have an understanding of all this stuff. It's real simple interface. It's so ridiculously simple, it doesn't give you squat for options. I'm not a big fan of it because it is so weak as far as getting something to go. But in order to install it, what you would do in order to get the graphical tool for regular Samba, as far as that goes, and that's going to be yum space install space dash y space, and you're going to say system dash let's see here, configs dash Samba. That's a dash. Samba, like that. And that will install the graphical tool for Samba. Now if I come in here, see if I may already have it installed. I don't know. I don't remember. Samba. I got something. Question is, what do I have? I'm not sure. Okay, so this is it right here. So you see the two ones we set up? There they are. And they are read-only. If I wanted to, I could come in here and edit them. I could say writable. I could say visible, so on and so forth. Like this, I can change my access on it. Give access to these user student. Give access to everyone. So on and so forth. It's pretty simple to use. You want to add a new one? No problem. Click this right here. Select the folder. Put in the name, description. It says writable, visible, blah, blah, blah. But you can see your options are very limited for what you can do with this. There's like a couple hundred options. You have only about maybe 5-10 options on the graphical tool here, so it's very little to work with. But if you just want to knock something out real quick, real easy, and get something up and going, the graphical tool is great for that. I do recommend backing up your configuration file in case it overwrites it, because that quite often is what happens with the tools from Red Hat. They're graphical, and you'll lose all the wonderful comments. Because if it overwrites it, it'll just wipe it out and just put just this little basic configuration in there, and then all that information that we just went over and had in there with all those wonderful little comments, gone. and you just have to figure it out for yourself. Copy. Just copy it to another track. Yeah, to another file name. Do something like .old or something at the end of it. Like for instance, smb.conf.old or .backup. I like to do that .backup, and you can even number your backups: backup 2, backup 3, backup 4, backup 5. The highest number on your backup would be the latest backup, etc. So on and so forth. So it's up to you how you want to do it. But be aware of that. These graphical tools from Red Hat will wipe out your configuration file almost always. I've yet to see it where it hasn't done it, so be careful of that. I don't mind the tool, but back up your configuration file before you use the graphical tool. They don't tell you that in the book. That is the truth, though. That is what happens. You can find additional information in your book on some of this stuff. Not much, but you can find some stuff. For a real good coverage of Samba, you need a book on it. They're about 500-page book would really cover it. But they have just a basic breakdown of some of the stuff, like I went over already in the file. They have it listed on these pages. It's basically the same stuff I went over. And then they have some troubleshooting stuff too on page 841. But yeah, any questions? All right, so that's what you're going to do today. You're going to go in here and you're going to set up a Samba server, test your Samba client against it, make sure it works, and all that stuff. Make sure everything's up and running. Cool, cool. All right. Yeah. After you get Fedora.